Is nuclear fallout harmless? The French government believes that in some circumstances it is. The circumstances in question are 3 decades of nuclear weapons testing in the South Seas islands of Polynesia. Now, France maintains that the level of radiation generated was too low to have any health implications, but local activists say the incidence of thyroid cancer in the area is 4 times higher than the international average. I'm Taimur Nabili, and on this edition of 101 East, we ask, is it time for France to come clean about its nuclear testing in the South Pacific? These days, the islands that make up French Polynesia are best known for glamour and style, glorious beaches and luxury tourist resorts. But behind the modern glitz lies a much darker history. Fawzia Ibrahim reports.
Some say this is literally heaven on earth. French Polynesia's beauty has inspired artists, writers and lovers. Its friendly people are known for their warmth and love of life. This Pacific paradise is a favorite for those seeking solace from the troubles of the world. But beneath these calm waters lie 4 decades of dark, angry secrets.
On n'a pas besoin, on leur a pas demandé.
We never asked them to bring the bomb here.
There's a danger that is threatening us is what's in the atoll of Mururoa and Fangatofa.
Our people have been used by the French government for experimentation.
Pour l'instant, aujourd'hui,
to this date, I don't know a single Polynesian who has been affected by radiation from the nuclear tests.
par les essais nucléaires.
Marius Chang is convinced his prostate cancer is linked to time spent on the Mururoa atoll. Chang worked as a policeman on the former nuclear test site and witnessed several detonations.
Je m'inquiétais pas pour ma santé.
I wasn't worried about my health. The nuclear experiments were explode a bomb. It explodes. They told us all of that is controlled.
Je sais qu'il y a des personnalités qui se sont levées pour protester.
Our people did all they could to protest against the French government's decision to carry out nuclear tests here.
They didn't organize a referendum to ask the people here if we agree or not. They like to say they are a democratic country. They should have asked the people of this country if they can come here and organize the French nuclear testing. That has not been done.
France admits their nuclear tests have resulted in some radioactive fallout, but the government remains silent over whether the experiments are related to the alarming rate of cancers in French Polynesia. For nuclear scientist Bruno Barrio, the link is clear.
Tous les scientifiques sont vraiment d'accord sur le fait de lier.
All the scientists are in agreement.
En particulier pour Tchernobyl.
There is a link, as has been seen in Chernobyl, a link between the fallout from a nuclear explosion and thyroid cancer.
There are several possible factors, but nothing has been confirmed yet. It could be genetic, it could be hormonal, it could be diet, because here people consume lots of fish and seafood. It could also be, of course, radiation. We can't deny that, but there is no evidence right now that points towards any specific factor. That's where we are today.
After the last test in 1996, the French military downsized their presence here in French Polynesia. But access to Mururoa and Fangatofa is still restricted only to French military personnel. 10 years on, French Polynesians are asking, if the tests were clean, why the need for such high security measures?
This secrecy extends to any information on test sites, including employee health records and monitoring data. A group of former test site workers are pushing to gain access to these records in the hopes of seeking compensation from France. Roland Oldham, who heads the group, accuses Paris of deliberately stalling.
Most of the people today are between 50 and 60 former workers, and they are ill, they have cancer. So the strategy to make it last the longest they can, so in 10 years' time all of them will be dead. And then by that time they will say that there is no victim of French nuclear tests.
But a leaked document and pressure from the former ruling Independence Party has forced France to take action. Last year, an initial report from the French Public Health Institute made the first official link between the tests and cancer rates. That document, along with an inquiry under the then ruling pro-independence party, became too much of a public embarrassment for France. The government appointed nuclear safety official Marcel Jurien de la Gravière to look into the issues uncovered.
It was not easy because, of course, he tried to say as little as he could, and we were asking, you know, open up the archives and give us the names of the workers, and each time he would say no, no, no.
The former test site workers are divided over the nuclear issue. Yannick Logreen says he has not suffered any medical problems from his time spent on Mururoa. And unlike Marius, Yannick is convinced the nuclear tests had a positive effect on the country and its people.
Oui, je veux rajouter un truc. Je vais vous faire cette photo. La photo de
do they look unhappy to you?
Là-bas, quand vous les regardez, ils sont malheureux.
I don't think so.
Je pense que ça a été une bonne chose pour les Polynésiens.
I think that the tests were a good thing for Polynesians. Why? Because today we have a quality of life that we would never have had if the nuclear test centre hadn't been here.
Nous n'aurions jamais eu sans la venue du centre d'essai nucléaire ici.
D'un côté, sous nos pieds, il y a la bombe.
On one hand, we've got the bomb. On the other hand, okay, we now have hospitals, new cars, airports, schools, roads, all those things.
Okay, okay. Je ne refuse pas cela, je ne refuse pas cela. Mais à quel prix?
I don't deny that. But at what price? I'm not involved in any of this to get paid or for compensation. All I'm asking for is justice.
Je demande simplement la justice.
We've been mistreated for those many years, 30 years, 40 years now. There's nothing wrong with asking forgiveness to the Polynesian people. I think that in the heart and in the mind of Polynesian people, France will regain his whole grandeur.
Well, I'm joined now in our studio by Roland Oldham, who's the president of the Association Mururoa e Tatu, a group of former test site workers, and by researcher Nick McClellan, who's the co-author of After Mururoa, France in the South Pacific. I'm also joined from Paris by Patrice de Beer, who's the former editor of the French newspaper Le Monde. Roland, if I may begin with you. As we heard in the film there, the French government has said it's going to begin taking some direct action on some of the things and problems that you, among others, have brought up. Tell us where we stand right now with regards to what the French government is doing and whether you're satisfied with these first steps.
We are not satisfied at all. First of all this action that the French government is taking now is because of the pressure that our organization have put on the French government. We are not satisfied because they are sending doctors around, the doctors from the army, from the Ministry of Defense, are going to go around and examine all these former workers, and they're going to decide if this, the illness of these people, of these workers, come from nuclear testing or not. How can a doctor from the army can do that? I mean, as the other guys say on the thing before, it should be an independent study, but it is not independent study.
Okay, well, let's go to Patrice de Beer in Paris. Patrice, from the French government perspective, the film we saw there may seem to be rather harsh. There's a lot of questions being asked and answers seem hard to come by. What's the perspective from where you are?
Well, the French government has a problem with not only with French Polynesia, but also with the French technicians, civilian and militaries who worked in around the nuclear test, which means around 150,000 people. But so far, nothing has been done except these surveys that were mentioned a minute ago. But on the subject of compensation, On the subject of moral recognition, not much has been done, despite the fact that there have been two bill projects put up by the opposition in French Parliament demanding that a legal recognition of a link between the nuclear tests and a specific number of diseases, so that there should be automatic compensation.
Let me stop you there for a moment and just ask, what of those French service personnel who were involved in the testing over those 30 years, do they have a representative group in France that is also demanding some kind of inquiry?
Yes, they do, and they have published statistics. That's how I know that about 150,000 people worked there during the 30 years of the nuclear tests. A survey has been done on 720 veterans, which show that among these people, 30% had cancers, which is a huge percentage. And these people are demanding that not only them, but also people who lived around the atolls should be compensated, and not compensated the way it is working now, which means that you have to sue and you have to find experts, but automatically compensated.
Okay, so we've established a base case here. I mean, we've yet to back it up, and we'll do that in a moment. But Nick, let me just ask you to step back. We've had a view from Polynesia and a view from Paris, and both seem to agree there's a case to answer. What I want to ask you is just to step back and give us a historical and international perspective. Why is it that when both Paris and Tahiti agree that there is something to be done, that the French government is not being forced by the international community to stand up and address the issue?
Well, one problem is that the issue of nuclear testing has dropped off the agenda. In the Pacific Islands, there are over 300 nuclear tests in the atmosphere and underground, right from the beginning, 1946 with the American testing in the Marshall Islands, British testing in Australia and Kiribati, and then the French tests.
But this being the whole point is that the US and the UK have recognized their responsibility to a degree.
Certainly, and the Americans have quite a complex system for what they call downwinders, people who live downwind of the nuclear tests. And so for the Marshall Islands, the Americans have an elaborate legal system, a guaranteed compensation, and as Patrice is saying, automatic compensation. So rather than people having to go to court to prove that their cancer or leukemia or whatever was caused by the testing, there's an automatic presumption, and that changes the burden of proof. And this is a really fundamental issue for the workers that Roland represents. To have to go and lodge a court case in Paris, a very expensive process, is very difficult. What people are calling for is a shift in the burden of proof, that people who were there, who have certain types of diseases, should get this automatic compensation. And that's a scheme the Americans have.
Before I come back to you, Roland, I just want to get to Paris very quickly once again. And Patrice, ask you for a quick summary of what the French government's defense has been against these charges up until now.
Well, as far as I know, not much, because despite the fact that the 150,000 people living in metropolitan France have been affected, the French public opinion doesn't know much and doesn't really care about Tahiti, one. But also, two, one has to remember that the local government in French Polynesia, which has a very large degree of autonomy, has, except for a couple of years, been controlled by people who are from the same political party as the ruling party in France. That the man who ruled in Tahiti, Gaston Flosse, has been a friend of Jacques Chirac for about 30 years, that they had business deals together, and that there was never real pressure from the local authorities, except when Oscar Temaro was in charge. There was never pressure from the local authorities to Paris to act.
Roland, a quick word though. I mean, it must be said, and it was pointed out briefly in our film there, that the influence that the French have had in Polynesia has been positive in a large number of ways. I mean, the income levels are very high for that part of the world. There's a lot of development. They've been beneficial to a large extent, and they have kept an eye on the environment. It's not been entirely a case of neglect, has it?
Well, yeah, whatever people say, we don't look at it like that, because we know that the effect on on the health of our people and generation to come, we have to take that in consideration, and also the impact on the environment. And on the other hand, we have to remember that the argument of the French government is always the economy. And French government have been blackmailing our leaders, our politicians. I agree with what has been said there, on the argument of economy, on money, and to make this nuclear test possible. And because of that also, a lot of problems come our own politicians that have been governing the country for many years because of this constant blackmailing, and also there's some kind of corruption that our politicians have accepted for many years.
All right, we'll explore some of those charges and a couple of the other issues to be spoken about in just a couple of minutes. We're going to have to take a short break, but we'll continue after this short break. Stay with us.